of a spiritual journey. I am delighted to welcome Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who many of you are already texting and asking me throughout the day, is he related? And the answer is a resounding yes. With much honor, he is. I can say related to me, and we are first cousins. Our fathers are brothers. And I want you to know, all of you, that I have, in my youth and growing up as a teenager, I always looked up to my eldest cousin, who's the statesman of the cousins of the Jacobson family. He's always demonstrated incredible wisdom and wit and brilliance. I always admired his deep concentration and focus and his ability, as we're going to hear, to stand for hours before the Rabbi, and played a very important role in the great life of the Lubavitch Rabbi. I would like to give a warm welcome to Sol Polachek and Mona Polachek and the Polachek family. Tonight is the yahrzeit of Sol's father. His name was Yeno Yitzchak Polachek, and we want to take the opportunity to dedicate tonight's class and study of Torah to his memory. And the grandson who was named after him, Gary Polachek, a dear friend, past president of our synagogue, I asked Gary if he would do us the honor to welcome our guest of honor. So Gary Polachek, please give us the honor.
Thank you, Rabbi. Friends, good evening. Bienvenue, Erev Tov. We're in for a real treat. Very few people get the chance to learn from and spend intense time with one of the giants of the Jewish world. The Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson was arguably one of, if not the most impactful Jewish leaders of the 20th century. He inspired many hundreds of his students to emerge as shluchim, as leaders, who went on to inspire many, many more to carry the torch of Yiddishkeit the world over, and that have made a difference in the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Jews. The centerpiece of the Rebbe's teachings occurred at his Farbrengen, where the Rebbe would speak for hours at a time without notes. But because they were held on Shabbat and Yom Tov, on the holidays, they were not permitted to be written or recorded. So a small team of scholars, the best and the brightest at Lubavitch Central 770, those with a profound understanding of his teachings, ensured that they would capture his message through memory and transcribe it after Shabbat for the Rebbe's approval. From 1979 until the early 1990s, this incredible undertaking was led by tonight's guest speaker. It is with great pleasure that we extend a warm welcome to a student of the Rebbe, a Torah scholar himself, a master teacher, a man of wisdom, insight, and humility, an author of the best-selling book Toward a Meaningful Life, which has been translated into more than a dozen languages, and as the Rabbi has already noted, a dear cousin of our very own Rabbi. Please join me in welcoming Reb Simon Jacobson.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you, Rabbi, for your glowing words. It's always a challenge to try to live up to these type of introductions, but we will do the best we can. And yes, indeed, it was a tremendous honor for me for those years of sitting at the feet of this great man, the Rebbe, where not only was there scholarship and brilliance, as mentioned, but also wisdom about the human condition, the struggles and the issues all of us deal with on a daily basis in our personal lives, in our interpersonal lives, family, work, challenges like now we're dealing with the pandemic. That Rebbe had a keen and unique way of taking thousands of years of Torah wisdom and applying it to contemporary life in the most relevant and powerful fashion. So let me begin. The title of our discussion will be, Are You Dispensable? I want to share a story, which is perhaps one of the most definitive moments of my life, personal life. It was after my book, as was mentioned by Gary, the book Toward a Meaningful Life was published. So this was back in 1995, a while ago, in the previous millennium. And the publisher, William Morrow, a large American publisher, sent me on a book tour. A book tour, I don't know if they do that anymore these days. They send an author to many different cities, and you get interviewed, the press, whether it's print, radio, TV, and then in the evening you speak at a bookstore. The chain of Barnes & Noble, Borders was then a large chain as well. So I want to share this story that happened in St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, so I had the talk, it was a Monday evening. I remember it very vividly. It was actually the night, some of you may remember, after Prime Minister Rabin's assassination in Israel. So all of the JCCs all over the world determined to make one Haskara, a memorial evening for him. And it was a Monday night. I happened to be the speaker, not planned for that memorial, that came later. I was already planned to be a speaker from a while back. So it was a very large turnout, not for me, but for this memorial. But it ended up being a few thousand people showed up, which may set the stage for what happened next. So I gave my talk, and afterwards, as the custom is, you sign books, and you're treated like a celebrity for a night. I made sure it shouldn't get to my head, because by midnight you turn into a pumpkin, and suddenly nobody notices you. And I gave my talk, and afterwards people came over, and I signed books. Some people asked me a question. I mean, there was some interaction. When I get back to New York, where I'm based, I receive this note, which I'm going to read to you from memory, because it's so etched in my psyche and my personality, that note, the note that I received, that I'll never forget it. And I want to share it with you. So here's, dear Rabbi Jacobson, I was in the audience listening to your words that night when you were here in St. Louis. And I wanted to come over to speak to you, but there was a long line. And then I anyway got a cold feet because I didn't feel comfortable. So I decided to put it into writing. And this is what she writes. She writes, I'm a 47-year-old executive that works in a prominent firm in St. Louis. I'm well respected. I'm well connected. I have a measure of wealth and status. One of the business leaders in this community here. However, beneath the veneer of my success lies a woman in shreds. These are her words. You see, my soul was murdered when I was a young child, growing up in a very dysfunctional and abusive home. I suffered all forms of abuse, emotional, psychological, physical, sexual abuse, and it left me soulless. I loathe myself. And that has been my life. Feeling no value, feeling worthless. So a person like myself, when you don't have inner value, you create outer value. So I was very ambitious and very driven to succeed, to somewhat compensate for all the pain I had. And I grew in the ranks, and I became a leader in my company. But it didn't really do much. It didn't do much because beneath the surface was this crying child who did not feel any value. I could not create any healthy relationships or intimacy. I didn't trust people. I always tested people all the time for their loyalty, and people didn't trust me. But there we go. I was this success story on the surface, but beneath the surface was a very different story. I had long given up hope. I've tried many types of therapy. Someone happened to give me a copy of your book, Toward a Meaningful Life. And though I'm not a religious Jew, as a matter of fact, I stay away from anything that's affiliated to synagogues or formalities because my family did associate with the Jewish community here. So anything they associate with, I disassociate with. But I was looking at your book and I was just leafing through it, and one line jumped out at me. These are her words. She writes, "The line that jumped out at me struck me like a silver bullet between my eyes." The line, it says in the beginning of the chapter on birth, it says, quoting the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, "Birth is God saying, you matter." And I read it again. Birth is God saying, you matter. I read it a third time. Birth is God saying, you matter. And I will read that line the rest of my life. Let me tell you what I suddenly realized, an epiphany. I don't know why it happened after 47 years. I suddenly realized that despite what my parents did to me, despite what society does, that it looks at each of us as a statistic on someone's balance sheet, despite all that, I matter to the one that matters most, God, who created me. Until that point, I thought value was based on good looks, youth, vigor, ambition, drive, equity, your social status. No, I matter to the one that matters most. And it makes no difference, even if I'm not productive in a certain day. I'm absolutely necessary. Birth is God saying you matter. So though I have many years to heal, she concludes in this letter, and it would be quite eloquent if it weren't under the circumstances. She writes, though I have many years to heal, but for the first time I have some hope. You see, my work that I have to do is to create bypass surgery, to bypass the infected psychological arteries that were polluted by my childhood, and go back to that pure moment, the moment when the snow was completely pure white, when I was born, and God said, you are my child, I love you unconditionally, you're indispensable, you matter always to me. And then she concludes this note by saying, so thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, for giving me back my life. That's the letter I received. I can't even describe how I felt. I was sobbing. I literally was crying uncontrollably. You know, first of all, a woman sharing sacred confidence like that. She doesn't know me. Secondly, just her story, her life story. You know, I thank God, was blessed to be born relatively. No family is perfect, but relatively a healthy family with love and nurturing. It's hard to imagine and fathom such desolate life. And I'll tell you what I did next. I opened up the book Toward a Meaningful Life, even though I had written it, but I wanted to see it through her eyes. You know, when you write a book, you're the author, but once the book is in the reader's hands, the reader reads it as they see fit. So I went back to read the chapter, and it resonated with me, this tremendous insight that here, I had never met this woman. The Lubavitcher Rebbe never met her. But here's a line that in many ways transformed her life. I don't know if I appreciated that much until that point. That idea, which of course comes from the Torah, from Judaism, one of the most fundamental lessons in Judaism, which we'll discuss. So I wrote her back. Just for the record, 1995 was just the beginning of email. So I don't think it was by email yet. You know, if you may remember AOL and some of the others, Prodigy, I think, I forget the other ones, CompuServe. I wrote her back, thanking her for her words, offering my help and support in any way, and asking her permission to share the story, which she readily gave. She said, just don't mention my name. And if anybody ever wants to contact me, please tell them that I want to please protect my privacy. You know, because I'm sure other people have the same similar story, or they might want to show voice of support. I'd rather stay anonymous. So she gave me permission to tell the story. We've been in touch over the years, and she still struggles, but a very different human being. Let me tell you what I took from this story. Till this day, it haunts me. What haunts me? I started asking audiences. I speak quite often travel around the world. Now a little less. Now it's more through these technologies, Zoom and so on. But I've asked audiences, probably over 100,000 people I must have asked this question in different venues. Do you think you really matter? Do you think you really matter? The first reaction, people chuckle and giggle, like a silly question. Of course I matter. I have a healthy ego. I have plaques on my wall. I have a family that considers me valuable. I have workers, clients, employers. But then I rephrased the question. I said, let's imagine this question. If you were never born, would it make a difference to anybody? Now that's a different question. Once you're here in this earth, once you exist, obviously we all try to find ways to justify our existence. And I'm sure we all have our sphere of influence, our children, our families, our spouses, our friends that value us. But if you were never born, would it make a difference? Remember, there's no tragedy if you don't appear because no one's expecting you. So yes, we matter circumstantially, but on a cosmic level, on a fundamental level, would the world really be different if you didn't exist? And I can tell you that most people start feeling a little queasy and uncomfortable. And I'll just tell you, this is not a scientific survey, but the response I've heard and seen from people, some people say, you know what, I don't really think I matter that much. I matter. But in 100 years from now, 200 years from now, I don't know if anybody will remember me. Some people say, I'm not really sure. I rarely hear somebody say, I'm absolutely indispensable. The world cannot exist without me. Now, this seems like a simple question, but it's a fundamental, critical one. This woman in St. Louis provoked me to ask myself this question. Do I matter? I'm the oldest of 5 children. As Rabbi, my dear cousin, Rabbi Jacobson, he's my first cousin, so I'm the oldest of 5 children. And, being the oldest, I'm sure I was a little spoiled. The oldest. As they say, siblings go to therapy for their older sibling, but you don't have to go to therapy for your younger siblings. And of course, my parents always told me they love me. But is that why I matter? Because my parents told me they love me? Or because others told me they love me? And what happens if, God forbid, one day my parents would tell me, hey, you know what? We don't love you so much today. So my stocks go down? Is it dependent on what they say? I would never have asked this question because I took it for granted. But this woman in St. Louis did not have that luxury because she did not have anyone validating her value. So it made me think, do I matter because people tell me I'm special or because of another reason? And I thanked her. I wrote to her months later, I wrote to her, you know something? You hit the nail right on the head. That's the true answer. Yes, it's good to have people around you and have a company and an environment that nurtures you and supports you and validates you and reinforces and gives you that confidence. But the real reason we matter indispensably and absolutely is because God created you. No one can take that away from you because no one gave it to you. And therefore, that is the essence of why you are actually indispensable. So it doesn't matter if there are 8 billion people on this planet and counting, you are unique. And what you have to accomplish, you and only you can accomplish. This I learned from a woman who did not have that luxury. Sometimes it takes the eclipse of the sun to appreciate sunlight. When you're basking in the light, you take it for granted. But when it's eclipsed and you suddenly don't have the light, you start appreciating. This is what that woman was like. She did not have that gift. Now, I don't wish it on anyone, but in an interesting way, she discovered a truth that very few of us really come to realize. And it made me think. I started thinking about it on a sociological level. Most people don't necessarily feel they really matter on that level. So if you don't really feel that you're absolutely necessary and indispensable, how committed can you be to your choices and decisions? It's like if I said to you, you know what, we need you to wake up tomorrow, 7 o'clock in the morning. We're going to volunteer and visit some elderly people in a nursing home or in a hospital. Okay, COVID permitted, obviously. And you'll say, do you really need me? It's early in the morning. And I respond, I say, no, it's all right. You know what? If you can't come, it's also fine. How motivated are you going to become to participate? But if I told you I can't do it without you, you are absolutely necessary, it's a different story. They tell this joke about in the old days, in the old shtetl in Russia. So a little town of peasants once received great news. The great Tsar, the king, is coming to visit the town. You know, once in a history type of event, the major, great king. Now this town wanted to express their appreciation. So they said, what can we do for the king? He doesn't need anything we have. What do we have? We have no wealth. We have nothing precious. So they came up with an idea. They put a big barrel in the middle of the town. And everyone would take a bottle of wine. Now remember, a bottle of wine for people like that took months for them to be able to procure because they didn't have anything, but it was precious to them. And they would pour the wine into the barrel. When the king came, they would give him this big barrel of wine, even though he didn't need wine, but he would appreciate the gesture, the effort. Okay. Well, one smart Jew comes home to his wife and says, you know, it costs us 4 months of work to buy one bottle of wine, which we save for Passover. Since it's a big barrel, no one will notice. We'll pour a bottle of water into the barrel. And that's that. We don't have to spend an expensive bottle of wine, relatively to them expensive. Well, as you could imagine, all the Jews in town were equally smart. And everyone said the same thing. So what happened? At the end of the day, the king got a big barrel of water. Everybody poured water. When you don't think that your contribution makes a difference, how much are you going to be committed to it? So this isn't a small matter of recognizing your value. Your essential value in life is vital to everything that you'll do, your decisions, one way or the other. And then I thought of a theory which, I'll just suggest, you can take it or leave it, that perhaps the driving force of ambition in most people's lives is because perhaps subconsciously, in a concealed way, we're not necessarily conscious and aware of it, subconsciously, we may question whether we really are valuable. So we do everything possible to succeed and compensate and so demonstrate that I do have value. Look, here's what I did here, here's what I did, here's the mark I've made, here's my contribution. Well, the real answer is the one that I would say, it's difficult sometimes to sum up. Someone would say to you, sum up the entire Torah, sum up Judaism, sum it up in one sentence. It's not that easy to do. But I can tell you my opinion that the single most important statement in the Bible, in the Torah, that has driven the Jewish people, and I would say beyond the Jewish people, something that became a factor that shaped history, was the statement where God says, I am going to create a human being in my image, in the divine image. Not just another creature, a divine force, an indispensable force in life. That the people, a human being, is not described as an intelligent human being, an emotional human being, as a social creature. No, an indispensable piece of the divine. And that was the driving force that gave the Jewish people throughout history that determination, that fortitude, the unwavering commitment that every act they do makes a difference. And it doesn't matter how much they suffered, that was the driving force. So in a sense, you can say, if you don't have the element of feeling indispensable, then everything else is compromised. What difference does it really make if it's optional, if it's arbitrary, that you do an extra mitzvah, that you pay a price to be kind? What difference does it make? If, I hear the question very often, children ask this question, adults ask this question. We all die anyway at the end. So who cares if you're a good person or a bad person? Everybody's going to be buried in the same ground. But Torah teaches us, no. Every act you do is forever. And everything about you is indispensable, now and forever. And that explains when we think about our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, the prices they paid. You know, we live relatively easy life. It's a prosperous world. We're free to practice our Judaism. We're free in so many ways. I understand we have challenges. We have today the COVID challenges. We have personal challenges, but you can't compare it to, let's say, 80 years ago. If we were around 80 years ago in Europe, where would we be? I don't even want to mention it. You go back 100 years, 200 years, every one of you, look at the trajectory of your history, how you ended up where you are right now. Where were your great-grandparents? Somewhere they were probably being persecuted, if not worse. And you ask yourself, was it worth it? So I remember once having a conversation with my father, was a journalist, Gershon Jacobson. He was good friends with Elie Wiesel. After my father passed away, I maintained the friendship. I would go see him, we would speak. So I once asked him this question, which was a question I also asked many Holocaust survivors. I said to him, is it true that in the concentration camps, is it true that when the Jews were marched to the gas chambers, some of them would sing a song, a special song called Ani Mamin, I believe with complete faith in the coming of the Messiah. So he said to me, we were in the barracks, they kept us at a distance from the gas chambers, so even though we knew what was happening, but they wanted to keep us in the dark, so to speak. But I can tell you, on a nightly basis, in the mornings, during the day, I heard that song and other songs and a Shema Yisrael, the prayer, Kaddish. It was an ongoing thing. You always heard it, either someone whispering it or a little louder. So I said, I want to ask you with all respect, I'm just an American kid born after the war. I cannot even imagine these horrors. But how did the Jews have that presence? And it seems almost insane. I mean, here God is completely concealed. He's allowing his people to be massacred in the most inhumane ways. And they're singing his praises and thanking him and sanctifying him. And I say with complete faith, this was the darkest time in Jewish history. They would have all the right to complain and have grievances against God. So I wanted to hear his response, and he says to me, well, first of all, we all know the Jews are insane in certain ways. Okay, but after the joke, he responded as follows, and I've heard this echoed from quite a few. He said to me, no, this was not an act of escapism or denial or craziness. It was actually a very deliberate statement. The Jews were declaring for now, for then and forever, that you can take our bodies, but you can't take our souls. You can take our lives, but you can't take our values. And if it won't be us, it will be our children. And if it won't be our children, it will be our grandchildren. But we will prevail. And there will be the day when the world will be transformed, and we will never give up on the kindness and the goodness of our souls, because we are indispensable, and ultimately we shall be the conquerors. You think about it. So the Jews were not surrendering. They were saying you could only affect part of us, but you can't take that indispensable soul that we have. Now, fast forward. I remember I was in Berlin, Hanukkah, a few years ago. So the rabbi there takes me, I said to him, show me around a bit. Germany, Berlin, Germany, a very dark place, dark history. So we go to the Brandenburg Gate. The Brandenburg Gate is where, I don't even want to mention his name, the one we say, Yamach Shemoy Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichrei, may his name and his memory be erased. That's where he would stand, and we have videos today and pictures. He would stand with the hundreds of thousands of his Jugendrat and spew his venom right there at the Brandenburg Gate. You know what's there right now on Hanukkah? The same place where he stood, a Hanukkah menorah. And when I asked the rabbi, how'd you pull that off? The Christmas trees I saw to the right and to the left. How'd you get the menorah in the center? He says, I convinced the curator of this area here for the holidays that it's good for the choreography, looks good for the pictures, to have the menorah in the center and the trees on the sides. Okay. In Berlin today, you find yeshivas, Jewish schools, you find Jewish children, little boys and girls. So yes, unfortunately, a third of our people were taken. But the 2/3 that remained continued to fight. No one would have expected it. Everybody wrote off the obituary of the Jewish people after 1945. But it was because, whether it made sense or didn't make sense, there was that absolute conviction in the divine image and the indispensability of the human spirit. And that always will prevail. Came with a big price. And I'm not suggesting in any way that we don't cry over it. But look, what do we find today? So let's bring it now to our personal lives. Our personal lives. Now, every one of you has your life. You have your family. I hope it's all blessed, healthy, successful. But there's something more to life than just making it through. It's recognizing, and I remember this vividly when the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, once said at a Farbrengen, was mentioned before at a talk. He actually looked around and he made this statement. He said that every one of you has something to contribute that you and only you can contribute. Even Moses, the great Moses, and Abraham, and Sarah, and all the leaders, the men, great men and women of history, cannot accomplish what you have to accomplish, because if they could, why are you here? If God sent you here, you have something that only you can contribute. So we have to ask ourselves that question. What is it about me, my skills, my gifts, my contacts, my environment, and all the different elements that shape your life? What does it all add up to in your unique and indispensable contribution? And I can tell you this, I deal with many people, I deal with many problems, unfortunately. And you always look to find what's the root of so many issues that people struggle with. You know, the billions and trillions of dollars spent on therapy. And I can tell you, even though this may sound simplistic, but it's not. If we would inculcate and infuse our children with a sense of their indispensability, not arrogance, but that you are here because you must accomplish something that only you can accomplish. I assure you, that would be the best preventive and preemptive medicine to so many of the maladies of our time. Because remember, people are looking for value. And if they don't find it in a healthy way, they'll find it elsewhere. And what is the void inside you, inside a person, when you don't feel that you really are necessary, when you feel you're optional? I mean, how many children today grow up in environments and homes where they're told, hey, you know, you're an option. So we have to infuse our children with this awareness. And there's actually, to make everything practical, there's a Jewish way of doing it. It's actually a universal way of doing it. You're probably all aware of the morning prayer, right in the morning when we wake up, even before anything else. We have a one-line prayer. It's called Moda'ani. Thank you for returning my soul to me. That's essentially the message. Now, many of us say lip service, mechanically, robotically, but let's think for a moment about what that is. Anyone knowing, you don't need to go to business school to know that there's no business that can function without a mission statement. So if someone says to you, hey, I'd like you to invest in my business, and you say, so what's your mission statement? You'll say, oh, we didn't really develop it yet. Or it's very long, it'll take a few hours for me to share with you. Or we have 4 different options. I rest assured you're not going to give them 1 penny. So let's pose the question this way. If a business cannot function without a mission statement, how can a human being function without a mission statement? What's your personal mission statement? So most people answer, to be happy. I want to be happy. Some answer, I want to bring up a healthy family. Some will say, I want to be a good Jew. But those don't qualify, they're all good things, but they don't qualify as mission statements. It would be like saying the mission of this company is to produce happy employees or to make money. That's what every company has to do. A mission has to be unique, has to be short, and it has to inform every detail of what that company or organization or entity is trying to achieve. Now, most of us were never asked this question. We were never told, you need a mission in life. But this is the essence of Judaism. It's saying your soul is not here by accident. You came here for a purpose. You were sent here to accomplish something. And it's unique to you. Yes, all of us should be good people and virtuous people and do a lot of mitzvahs and study Torah and be kind and generous and so on. But that's a global statement. Specifically, how do you do it through your particular skills and your unique personality? So Moda'ani in the morning is essentially declaring on a daily basis, your mission statement. Thank you for returning my soul to me. Thank you for making me unique. Thank you for renewing my contract. And that vote of confidence that I am, birth is God saying you matter. The same thing as when you wake up in the morning is like a new birth. That I have something that I must accomplish. And it's not just the means, which means to make money or to achieve other things. You know, when people ask the question, your value, what is it based on? Yeah, so your net worth is not what defines your self-worth. Unfortunately, many people, I ask people sometimes the question, who are you? They give me their business card. But the business card is what you do. It's not who you are. And when I point that out, people say, okay, yeah, good point. But you know what? I've been doing this for so long. What I do has become who I am. Think about that. It's a pretty sad statement. Who you are should dictate and define what you do. Not what you do should define who you are. So the Moda'ani is meant to renew everything begins from your indispensable soul. Who are you? And that should define and inform what you do. But we're not trained this way. That's why I suggest a practical exercise would be to start teaching our children this and including ourselves on a daily basis. Besides the fact that I love you, my dear son, my dear daughter, you have something to contribute to this world that only you can contribute. And I'm here as your parent to do whatever I can to help you actualize yourself, to help you spread your wings, to help you be the unique you that you are. I remember my son, when he was a little child, he came home from school one day. He was very excited. You know, son is excited, my child's excited. I also got excited. What are you excited? I asked him. He said to me, I heard something very nice today. What did you hear? You were born an original, don't become a copy. And I liked that, I also appreciated it. Anyway, years have passed. My son now is a father himself. So recently I asked him, I said, so Mendel, surprise, that's his name, Mendel. I said to him, tell me, are you a copy or an original? He didn't even remember. I remembered, but he didn't remember. So I reminded him of what he had told me years ago. So no pun intended, he happens to be a copywriter. So he says to me, he's very good with words, he's a wordsmith. He says to me, well, I'm an original copy, whatever that means. We were born original and we become copies because either we want to please or we're pressured to conform or some other way where we don't end up really being ourselves. Now, Oliver Wendell Holmes, the poet, the writer, the judiciary, wrote a poem called The Voiceless. It's a devastating poem. Just one line that always strikes me, and it captures essentially the message that we're discussing here. He says, alas, alas to those that die with their song still inside them. Alas to those that die with their song still inside them. That's quite tragic. You can live your whole life, accomplish many things and good things, but the song, your song that only you can sing, sometimes is not expressed. Either fear or the pressures of life or the demands and expectations of others to be a certain way. It can come from parents, it can come from colleagues, it can come from the media and from a society, from many different directions. The essence of Judaism is that you have an indispensable song to sing, more than one song. And it behooves you, and it's incumbent upon you to learn to express it and have the courage to express it. Now, many Jewish people do not even know what I just said. Now, you can't tell me. I can tell you how much pushback. People say, what are you talking about? Judaism is all about conformity. It's all about herd mentality. You know, everybody coming together at Passover Seder, we're all doing the same thing. The farthest thing from the truth. God created individuals for a reason. Yes, we join together. It's called synergy. But synergy is not the annihilation of the individual. Synergy is like a musical symphony where each musical note and each musical instrument and each member of the ensemble is absolutely necessary, and they complement each other. We work together in harmony. It's called harmony within diversity. That is an unbelievable message that we have to incorporate into our own personal lives, into our families' lives, and it changes everything. Now, where did I come to this? This is what I learned sitting at the feet of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is one of the most important messages that every talk he gave, one way or another, focused on this essential message. You know, I'll leave you with one more final anecdote. Michelangelo, the great sculptor. So Michelangelo actually studied, I don't know if you know this, with Jewish rabbis, because he wanted everything to be precise. As a matter of fact, in the Sistine Chapel, that beautiful masterpiece he painted, so when you look at the tree of knowledge, just as an aside, so everyone thinks the tree of knowledge, especially in the non-Jewish world, thinks it was an apple tree, Adam's apple, the apple. They ate from the forbidden apple. The truth is, in Judaism, it's not an apple. There are 4 different opinions, actually, as it is with all Jewish ideas. There's always several opinions, but none of them is an apple. One of them is a fig. If you look at the painting of Michelangelo, it's a fig tree. And that does not state directly in the Bible. So you had to have heard that from the rabbis that he grew up around in Florence and Venice and so on. So Michelangelo was once asked, how do you paint these beautiful angels? How do you sculpt, rather, these beautiful angels in the marble? And you know what he answered? He said, I look at the marble and I see the angels trapped inside the marble. They're trapped there. And I carve and set them free. In other words, he's not creating them, he's revealing them. Each of us, every one of you, every person on earth for that matter, is an angel, has a beautiful song, has a flower. You can use many different analogies, but it's trapped. Sometimes it's trapped in marble, sometimes in concrete, and sometimes in other substances. Everybody's got their life. Our work is not to create that beauty. It's to allow it to emerge, to make sure that the means and the ends don't get confused, to focus that whatever you're doing in your material life is meant to be carving away the external layers so your angel can soar, that your song can sing. And that is the essence of all Torah and mitzvahs. That fundamental point. The Torah and the mitzvahs are tools to reach and achieve that level. So when we think of it that way, it really can change our entire perspective on every aspect of our lives and every detail, and that knowing that you and you alone have something indispensable to bring to this world that no one else can achieve. It also gives you that absolute confidence, because no human being can take it from you, because no human being gave it to you. It's not man-made, it's divine, and it's your divine right. And as such, it gives us that strength to conquer and to challenge any fears, insecurities, and unknowns that come our way. Now, is it easy? It's not always easy. That's why we need each other. That's why we bring together. That's why we come together. We speak, we celebrate, we pray, we learn and study. It gives each other strength. But it's strength to go back to our journey in life with that arsenal, armed with that awareness of the divine spark, the divine image that each of us has, which makes us unique, extraordinary. And the words that birth is God saying, you matter, now and forever. And we hope and pray for the day as we approach Passover, just in 2 weeks. we approach Passover where we come together and honor the redemption of the Jewish people over 3,300 years ago, but it's also a prelude to the final redemption. And in simple words, what's the final redemption? It's when the entire universe and every individual, every one of us will recognize our indispensable music, and that we could all join together in a cosmic symphony, a grand cosmic symphony. Everyone in their unique way, playing their music, but it joins together and creates something greater than the sum of the parts. And this is what we call Geula Hamitis Vashlema. This is what we call the final redemption, personal and global redemption. And the way we reach that is by first finding that redeeming your music, your song, and your angel and flower within you. So may God bless each one of you, all of us together, with a very blessed year, healthy year, with all these challenges that we're facing. And may you be able to find expression for your unique voice and soul within you, and by extension, help all those around you, starting from family, children, colleagues, adults, be able to achieve and accomplish that. Everyone should be blessed, and I really thank you again for the honor to share a few words. And thank you, my cousin, my dear cousin, Rabbi Jacobson, for this.
Thank you, Rabbi, so much. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here listening on Zoom and on Facebook. You opened up with a story, a powerful story that dropped all of our defenses. And you infused into our hearts and souls something so inspiring and beautiful, and something so needed in today's day, going through COVID, that opening line in that chapter that I think we're all going to be repeating in our minds every day. I want to thank Gary Polachek for choosing this topic, because so apropos. And I think the quote is, I've quoted it a few times, I think it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln, that we're all born God's original, but most of us die a cheap copy. And it's a very powerful quote that speaks to your theme. So I want to thank you for bringing your inspiration and light to so many in our community in Montreal, and I could say today around the world. We're going to be going to questions, and this is where usually the Farbrengen really begins. I encourage participants to post your questions in the chat. I'll try to get through it, but as we'll wait a few minutes for the questions to come in, I have a few of my own that I would like to ask, and I would like to go up first personal, because I grew up in the same community, and I was at the same Farbrengens, though somewhat younger than Rabbi Simon Jacobson, but I always envied your place 30 feet in front of the Rebbe, right in front of the Rebbe. I was somewhere in the bleachers or in a box under a table, but you were the oral scribe, or as we say in Hebrew, the choser. It was just an incredible honor and privilege just to have you as my cousin, being the person devoted to memorize 4 or 5 hours of the Rebbe's talks, and then transcribe that onto paper and share the Rebbe's message to the world. Could you just briefly share with everyone, what was it like? Could you describe what was it like being in that position as a young man with that responsibility, being the Rebbe's oral scribe?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you. You're embarrassing me a bit, to be honest, because I just see myself as your first cousin, and but when you put it this way, it's true. It's not about me, really. I did have the honor, and I really feel it was given to me on a platter. I happened to be in the right time in the right place. But it's very hard to fully describe. But I will say this, which is also really a tip. How do you do it? Can you remember verbatim 4 or 5 hours, and sometimes even more, and then commit it to paper? And just for the record, 4 or 5 hours meant around 100 pages of material. So I think explaining some of the process will also explain what I felt like personally. Essentially, it's like this. You know, children remember best. You know why? Because their minds are like dry sponges. A dry sponge absorbs. A wet, saturated sponge does not. So though adults have more mature minds, and we know more, but sometimes knowing more actually works against you when it comes to remembering. Because it's very hard to teach an adult, for example, a new language. Try teaching a 25-year-old ABC. But a child absorbs. And it's because of their clean slate. So really the process, even though this sounds so counterintuitive, but the fact of the matter is, memory is not a faculty of understanding and processing. It's a faculty of listening and absorbing. So the first thing it taught me to listen. And listening, everyone thinks is easy. No, most of us don't listen well. Middle of someone's sentence, we're already giving them our opinion. How often do you say something and then later the person says, you know, you gave me a nice answer, but it wasn't my question, etc. Listening means putting aside yourself, your perspectives, even your brilliance, and allowing yourself to absorb another person's sacred space. So what it felt like? It was very difficult to do, that I can tell you, because it's the temptation when someone's speaking, and especially a brilliant man like the Rebbe, the temptation is you want to understand it, and it answers a question you had yesterday, and you cross-reference, and you're constantly fitting it into your framework. And that actually the process had to be the opposite. Get your framework out of this, away, don't get in the way. Just absorb and listen. So it taught me how to listen to others, to listen to sounds that sometimes others don't hear because you're so busy with your own clutter. And it's the key to love and relationships, so many areas of life. For me, I don't know what I would be like had I not done that. It changed my whole being because in so many ways I absorbed the Rebbe's methodology. I sometimes wonder when someone asks me advice and I give advice, I say, is this me? Or is it something I learned, like from a master? And so that's part of the feeling. It's extremely humbling, to be very honest. Why is it humbling? Because it's not about you. You realize you're a channel for something greater than you are. And I think all of us have an element of that. We just need to train ourselves. We are not here to be brilliant orators and give off our energy, even though I spoke about uniqueness. We're here to channel something greater than ourselves. And when you can do that, you really become a gift to people around you. It's not always something I could say I always do well, but it's something that I learned to do, and it affects me in every possible way in my life. I mean, I can go on for hours, by the way.
So learn how to get out of your own way.
There you go. I like the short version.
I just want to follow up on that. I think you write in your introduction in the book, which I want to let everybody know, Towards a Meaningful Life. You can get it, I think, on on Amazon or bookstores around the world. A real worthy read, an essential read. But in your introduction, you talk about your personal relationship with the Rebbe, as far as sometimes you would have to give in the talks, and then he would revise it. Was there ever a moment in your history where maybe you felt you didn't get it, where you completely got in your own way, where you wrote something in and you completely misunderstood the Rebbe and you heard from him?
Yeah, quite a few times. Quite a few times, I must say. And by the way, the Rebbe, like a surgeon with a scalpel, would find any inconsistency. I was off by even a millimeter. The Rebbe had a very strong word he would use. It was in Hebrew called mavil. Mavil means shocking. The Rebbe would sometimes write, shocking. How could you even write something like that? And suggest that I said that. So I can't say it was every day, but I had quite a few of them. And I'll tell you something, I learned from it because the Rebbe's focus was so intense. And I learned how to listen better. But of course, there were times, I remember one of my first experiences, it was in 1980, the end of 1979, Hanukkah time. one of the first talks I ever wrote down from the Rebbe, full-length version. And the Rebbe was very into it, and he wrote me a whole note, and I misunderstood it. So he wrote back, Kinira, he writes, it seems like you didn't grasp the whole thing from beginning to end. So I actually am not embarrassed to share this, because that's how you learn. And I learned sometimes the hard way, but absolutely. The only way to learn how to get out of the way, as you put it, as I put it, is to get in the way a few times and realize that it's not the way to be. Then you learn and say, you know what, that's not the way. And so it happened quite a few times. In my defense, if I may say, you have to remember the Rebbe's standard was so high that it was almost impossible for anyone to really always live up to it. But still, there are things that sometimes I said to myself, yeah, how could I have written that, or how could I have understood it that way? But like in the process of all learning, the first step is always being ready to acknowledge that maybe you did it wrong. That pride and ego should never be a factor. You're looking for the truth. You're not looking to be right. You're looking for the truth. And sometimes the truth is something you haven't gotten yet. So be humble, open your like not a beating, but a good critique. The answer is because it was never meant to be critical. It was always about growing and becoming better. And that was very much the Rebbe's style. He always expected more, not because he was not appreciative of what you accomplished, but he always saw that you always have more potential. It's like someone who sees what can you become instead of looking at who you are, the potential you have. And I grew through that process. Yeah.
So let's go to the audience. Thank you for that. Those were just some personal questions I wanted to ask. But this question actually comes from a very well-known psychologist here in Montreal, who's one of our executive members of the synagogue. And this is her question to you. In your work with people, how do you help them access their uniqueness of what they are to achieve in this lifetime, to discover what their song is so they can sing it? How do you help them access it?
It's a great question. And I'll cite a Talmudic statement, a very interesting Talmudic statement, which I use all the time as a guide. It says, a student asked his teacher, where should I begin my journey? Where should I begin studying? And the answer was very interesting. He didn't tell him. He said to him, wherever your heart desires. In other words, we need it to resonate. I cannot tell you what your uniqueness is. So what I try to do in answering your question is I try to help identify something that resonates. Like, for example, just recently, I was talking to someone whose life wasn't working out, very unhappy marriage. Children were causing all kinds of issues. I mean, it was a mess. And I asked this woman, I said, tell me, is there anything you do on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a daily basis that gives you satisfaction? And she said, no, I don't have time to think about it. I said, when you were younger? She says, yeah, I love playing the violin. When's the last time you played violin? 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. So I encouraged her. I said, so why don't you take some time during the day and focus on that? What you need to do is find in the person's life experience or their talents or skills. And some of them, they're skills they don't even know they have yet. Sometimes you encourage someone, why don't you write a poem? Why don't you describe your life situation? And you suddenly find out, you know what? That person is very expressive. Other people are strong in being people. They're good with people. What you want to do is find something. You remember, you want to do it in the way the least resistance. You don't want it to be like pulling teeth. So you want to find something that resonates with someone and then help encourage them to become involved in it. And today online, with all the different platforms, it's quite easy to do that because you have all kinds of groups. You have writers groups, and you have poetry, and you have music, and you have embroidery, and you have sculpture, whatever it is. Everybody has their unique skills. Some of them, unfortunately, have not been actualized. Some are even dormant, and we don't even know about them. So you have to begin somewhere. So I would look for something that is a trigger that brings out the best in that person, and you keep cultivating that. And that becomes a force that counters some of the more negative stuff. And slowly, you start discovering your song, your voice. Now, whether it transforms your whole life, that doesn't happen overnight. That's why it's a process. But it's a good way to begin. So begin small. Find something. Our children, for example, some of our children are very creative. Some of our children are very cerebral. Find that skill or uniqueness and help encourage, incentivize the child. And you'll be surprised what kind of results come out of that.
Thank you for that. Search for their uniqueness. Don't impose it. You know, before this lecture, it was titled, Are You Indispensable? But there was a subtitle, which is your self-worth defined by your net worth? So I went to your book and I looked up chapter Charity and Wealth, because, and it's a great chapter, and I loved reading it. I enjoyed it as I enjoyed tonight. And I just want to bring up something that you speak about there, because you gave us the example of this woman who wrote to you, and that's a very extreme situation. But let's kind of channel to the general Hamoim. Let's say a lot of people that were raised with a certain level of nurture and care. You write in your chapter, money is how most people measure their self-worth. And that's true because we invest much of our time, energy, labor. We apply our skills and our intelligence, our abilities, all to make money. So we're putting a big part of our life, a majority of our life, to be able to make money. And that's how generally people measure their value. It's very interesting. We're having this discussion tonight on the heels of where millions of people tuned in to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, that whole story with Oprah, where the masses are looking at what's valuable, who's worthy to watch. Everyone's interested in, the royalty, the wealth, and that's how humanity has come to condition itself in valuing themselves. How much money do I have? How big is my home? How many cars do I drive? So you in this chapter want to kind of bring in the Rabbi's teaching how counterintuitive that is, and how that should not be the basis of how we kind of evaluate our net worth. And you talk about the importance, not only the importance of giving charity, but the necessity of giving that money away, giving that seeming value that we put on a pedestal, to give that away. So why would somebody do that? And how do we get people who have this conditioned understanding that all of their value is based on how much they make and how much they earn and what they've accomplished? How do we shift that from recognizing that that's not where your value, and your value is, as you were bringing to us tonight, you were born because God said you matter?
Well, what you're asking is, no pun intended, is the billion-dollar question. Because you see, in the story I shared with that woman, the executive, it really was the driving point. The only way she understood value, she realized that as much money as she has, and as much success as she has, material success, it was not going to make her feel special. She was still suicidal, and she was really struggling. Every day was a difficult day. Now, some people say the only way to appreciate the true nature of your indispensability, your soul, is when you hit rock bottom. I don't want to say that, because what does that mean? That we have to suffer, experience a trauma, a loss, and then we realize, you know what? Money isn't everything. The fact, however, is we live in a very comfortable life. We don't have to fight for values. I'll tell you something interesting. During this whole COVID mess, I spoke to around 8 months ago, 7 months ago, in the beginning around May, June, I did a Zoom with a large bunch of public schools, over 1,000 students from all over the United States. These are public school students, boys and girls in their teens. And I asked them, tell me, what are the 3 most important things in your life? Now, right now, in the month of June 2020. And they all, I mean, not everybody spoke up, but quite a few did. And they said something like, my family, my values, love, and so on. I said, what would you have answered in January 2020? And they all unanimously said, what did they say? You know what they answered? Sex, money, sports, video games, where I'm traveling to. So I said, how did that shift? They said, once you realize that some things, your comfort zones and your security blankets are stripped from you, you're left, as Warren Buffett says, you don't know who's been swimming naked until the tide is out. So basically, unfortunately, our blessings can also be our challenges. When you're prosperous and successful by material success, you can convince yourself that you're happy. It's only when you realize that money cannot buy you happiness and cannot buy you love and cannot buy you eternity that you come to that. So I would like to believe that all of us have certain soft spots and openings where we become aware of that fact, that materialism can never satisfy the spiritual transcendent needs of a human being. But it's a very good drug. Money is a drug like any drug. It's distracting. It makes you feel powerful. You can buy anything. And I'm not saying money is a bad thing. In Judaism, money is a blessing. Wealth is a blessing. But that's why, as you put it accurately, charity is the redeeming factor. It's saying, you know what it's saying? Don't worship your money. Your money was given to you in order for you to be able to do good things with it. It's a means to an end. So charity is not about giving away your money. It's actually elevating your money. It's redeeming it. It's a beautiful chapter in 37 in the Tanya from Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi, where he explains this point. It's so difficult to give charity. You know why? Because, as you said correctly, it's the measure of our value. It's very hard to give away your value. But then when you come to discover by giving it to a cause, and you have the ability to give it to that cause, it's actually redeeming your material life. So I don't know if there's a quick fix. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a wake-up call where something is lost before you recognize that you need it. And I think many ways COVID has been a wake-up call like that, because look at our plans, our summer plans, last year's Passover plans, school, business, restaurants, travel, you name it. Everything that we felt that we're so in control of, suddenly, hey, you know what? You're not in control. And for many people, I can tell you from my own work, for many people, this has been a very positive wake-up call. Obviously, we would love it didn't come with pain and death and illness, but as a wake-up call, it's a tremendous wake-up call. I've heard from people last year, Passover, where we really couldn't be together, even with family, many of us. Some couples told me they never had such a beautiful Passover together. At the same time, it also puts more pressure. So my short answer is, when you really can put focus on what really matters, you come to discover that money is a very powerful means, but not an end. It's a means. You do something with it. You build a temple with it. You build beautiful things. It's never as an end in itself. And if it becomes an end, it could end up becoming something that actually undermines your real value.
So I was kind of struck by when you started speaking about the importance of giving away what most people value. That it's akin to eating and sleeping. Giving charity is akin to, one must do it to breathe life into their soul. And then you said something very interesting. Most of us here, like I see in Montreal, tend to give when they get, meaning as they receive and as they make money. But in your book, you kind of reverse that. You say, you're quoting from the Talmud, that the rabbis sanctioned even the poor have to give. And that when someone's losing money or their business is not doing well, then instead of holding on tighter, on the contrary, that's when they should really start giving tzedakah, giving charity, because then you open up yourself to making God a partner in your life. So the attitude generally is, oh, when I make a lot of money, I'll give charity. And you kind of reverse that and saying, no, it's not an extra good deed. It's vital to your success. It's vital to your livelihood to give because it does as much as it does for the poor person, it's even doing for the rich person.
Exactly right. Psychologically, even though many of us may feel comfortable more by taking, but you become much more confident person when you give, because it means you have something to give. A taker at the end of the day may hoard more. So they may have more in volume, but they always feel I'm not complete on my own, because if I gave it away, I would cease to exist. I would become less. Those that really give, whether it's money or it's advice or time, are the people that really, the more confident you are with who you are, the more happy you are to share. And that's very much part of what makes us human beings, that we're givers more than takers. You know that scene in the Frisco Kid where the guy robs the train, and before he jumps off the train, he tells the people, remember, it's always better to give than to take, you know?
Thank you for that. So we could be here all night. We're gonna close tonight with one last question coming from the audience. It happens to be Gary's sister from Boston, Lori Polachek. That beautiful way to elevate the uniqueness, humanity in each individual. And here's her question. Do you think business leaders have a responsibility to create conditions that enable the spark, song inside people, to employ or a community to emerge?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll share with you a story, another Toward a Meaningful Life story. There was a big businessman in Manhattan, in New York City, who reached out to me. And I don't want to mention his name without his permission, but he's known, he's well known. And he said to me, I have to tell you something. I was always known to be a shark in business. You know, I was ethical, but I'm a tough negotiator, a real cutthroat type of guy. He says, the truth is, at home, I'm like a little lamb. But at work, I was this aggressive. I got to hold a copy of your book. I read the chapter on charity and wealth, and it said there that the Rebbe suggested have a charity box in your office, on your desk, as well as in your kitchen, as well as in your home. So I decided to put a charity box on my office desk, in my executive chambers. And before meetings, whoever I had a meeting with, I would give everybody a few coins, and everyone would put some coins in the charity box. He says it changed the whole climate, because everybody saw, one second, here's this tough negotiator, and he's introducing something you wouldn't expect. And people started talking about it. And he said it created more trusting relationships. We began to talk about our personal lives, our values. And then I used to buy boxes of Toward a Meaningful Life, and I would give out the book with a bookmark, the chapter of charity and wealth, to all my colleagues and potential investors and partners and so on and so forth. So there's no question, all leaders, but especially business leaders, because business is so much associated often with success, hard-driven success, often without a heart, have even a greater obligation to introduce the heart and soul. And it will make your business succeed more, not less.
Rabbi Simon Jacobson, my dear cousin, I want to, on behalf of our community, thank you for honoring Montreal and honoring our community with your words that are going to live in our hearts and minds for many years to come. I hope one day you get more letters from our community on the impact of your book that continues to have, for many decades, reverberations in generations now. So, kol hakavod, thank you. So I was worried, it's my cousin, is this nepotism? But I think after tonight, it's clear that Rabbi Simon Jacobson, you honored us, you honored me. Thank you for being with us. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. Please tune in next week. We have the Honorable Chief, the Justice Minister, Erwin Cutler, and the Order of Canada recipient, David Mattis, will be speaking about the plague of anti-Semitism, particularly Hate Among Us, the movie that the Chevra Kadisha Synagogue bought the rights of this movie. You will be able to register and watch this movie throughout next week. Next Thursday night, I will be interviewing the Honorable Erwin Cutler and the Order of Canada recipient Dave Mattis, two extraordinary Jews and two extraordinary Canadians. So please join us next Thursday. Rabbi Simon, thank you again on behalf of everybody. Really, a round of applause. And you could see the chats, how many people you've moved, and everyone's expressing their appreciation. So Warm regards to the family in New York. Have a good night. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know if I could say another word, Rabbi.
Of course, you're on. Our
Yeah.
Zoom is unlimited.
Yeah. I want to thank you particularly for making this happen. It creates a deeper bond. You know, we see ourselves now more, not just in family events, really beautiful, and your community, which I recall actually, I'm zooming in at your daughter's wedding, if you remember. So I want to bless you, my dear cousin, that you should be successful in your work, and everyone in your community are partners with you. And your synagogue and your community is a name out there. You have great responsibility and a great gift to share and be a good example to communities everywhere in spreading the light of God, the light of Torah, and the light of mitzvahs. I do want to say, if anybody wants more content from me directly, you could also go to meaningfullife.com. It's a website that I have that has a lot of robust programming and many of the other themes that we spoke about here. Someone had texted me before and asked me, so how do you find your mission statement? I actually have an article there that says how to find your mission statement. So just search for it and you'll find it. Wanted to just throw that in. And thank you again. Everyone have a good Shabbos and a good Passover. A very redeeming and transcendent holiday.
Chag
Thank you again.
V'sameach. Be well. Good night, everybody.